So we're here in Port Macquarie, and what's your name?
Milan.
Now, we met you last night. Now, the interesting thing is, you tell them where you were born.
So I was born in communist Czechoslovakia at the time in 1971 and escaped communism with my parents into Australia, which was a pretty daring escape too, because we were on the run for 3 months in Austria. Yeah, from the secret police. So that was a regime there, a government that was against its people, obviously. Not too different from China. You know, I mean, that's very similar sort of restrictions put on people. So yeah, a lot of people, if they could, they would make their way out, and a lot of them did in 1968 before the Russian tanks rolled in, and became, under communist rule. So a lot of people escaped, including my two uncles, came to Australia. So when we had the choice to come to either America, Australia, Canada, we chose Australia because of that. So because of the freedom,
I have to think, I think Czechoslovakia is the best sounding country in Europe. It's just such a great name, Czechoslovakia. But we started Cafe Lockdown backed on your president or Prime Minister, Havel?
Havel, yeah. So Havel was a writer, and look, I already left when a lot of it was turning, right? But he basically started us an alternate society. And my parents were part of that society. I didn't even know at the time, I was only 10. But they used to go in the mountains, very similar to where we are at the moment. They wanted to get away from the regime, from the programming, from the everyday control. So that was their escape, and there was a lot of people, there was a movement. It was a movement. A bit like the hippie movement, this was more of a movement to go out in the nature, play the guitar. A lot of it was to do, from what I remember, they took a lot of ethos, a lot of the philosophy was from the American Indians.
Oh, wow.
So a lot of the attire that they wore at the time, they had camouflage, army jackets, but a lot of them had sort of American Indian slogans on them, or names, and they would even have handles or names themselves. They were very Indian sounding. So 200, 300 people. It was quite a massive movement that would gather, almost every weekend in different places, away from the authorities.
It's just gatherings of people wanting to talk and be themselves.
Wanted to be themselves, wanted to have freedom, just wanted to create a better life. And the movement grew, and there was many other different movements. Obviously, there was the religious movement where people were prosecuted from going to church. So, they started practicing, Christianity at home, right, or in small groups. And there was many different movements from what I know. People were not happy with that much control, right, that much authority. So
with the question there, and this is, you're too young to remember it there, but what do you think it is about people with control that because I notice now they can't stop. Dan Andrews now's got a law, you can't walk off a bush path. So we're walking in this bush, we get off the path, get a $1,600 fine. What is it about bureaucracies who they can't give up the grip? They seem to...
Well, it's more than bureaucracy. If you study, and I studied NPD, narcissistic personality disorder, sociopaths, psychopaths, and at the top of the control pyramid, that's what you have. It's those sort of personalities. So it's not that it's not just bureaucracy. It's literally a few people that don't want others to have freedom. They don't want others to be creators. They don't want others to be self-sufficient, right? To collaborate, right? That's all. I'm more interested in building a new society. I am part of one, and a lot of people in this area that are building communities. We barter, we trade, we help each other, right? We've had our fair share of disasters. So we had floods, major floods here. We've had 2 fires. And the first thing I do, even when I was living in Sydney before moving to Port Macquarie, I would jump in a car, travel 4.5 hours, and just ask farmers, do you need a hand after the fires? Helping to make, fix fences. But, and I never knew how to fix fences, but I just offered my labour for free. So that's the sort of community spirit, that is still here. But a lot of people, the government is trying to take that away from people, right? They're doing it they do it an offer, hey, let us take over, and they offer to, provide services and conveniences and securities, and a lot of people will take them up on that offer, right? But you don't need to, if you've got a strong community, good neighbours, like-minded people, you can prosper from that. You can thrive.
You yourself are an entrepreneur, from what I'm gathering. And do you think entrepreneurs have a different way of looking at the world from people who just work for a living? Like, it's simply because you're not after anyone to fix your problems.
Yeah, you got to fix your own problems. That's right. So I was initially in the corporate world for 25 years in information technology, and then towards the end of my career, I was an intrapreneur. So entrepreneur is where you're using company resources, funds, and people to build networks, for instance. That's what I was responsible for. So, and it was basically, I was always there to make sure that it was for the benefit of the people. From the very early days of implementing the internet in Australia, connecting Australia to the rest of the world, I was one of the engineers that was doing a lot of the hands-on work, to the very last days where, I was building networks that would benefit people. The problem is, like with anything, any technology, it's a tool. It can be used for good and bad. So now, after retiring early, I wanted to use the assets that I've built up, the funds. I was always more of a saver than a spender, and put them to use, become an entrepreneur.
Before you get there, there's the entrepreneur. You have to take on the responsibility.
Definitely.
And what I've been saying recently, and I don't know what you think about this, is that a lot of Australians gave up their freedoms, and they said they got their freedoms back, but the only freedom I see they've got is freedom from responsibility.
Yeah, that's correct. So being an entrepreneur is not too different, say, to being a farmer, right? You are responsible for the land, you're responsible, or the property, you're responsible for the people, you're responsible for the livestock, for everything. You need to produce. You need to be a producer, not just a consumer. And you have to, balance your checkbook. You need to plan ahead. A lot of people have lost that simple art. Now, you can do that in, being an entrepreneur, selling goods and services, providing a service for people. You can be an entrepreneur, like, a self-sufficient farmer is as well. People have been restricted. As you saw during the lockdowns, people could not practice that. All right. So I actually started studying law out of interest. Contract law, did a short course at Harvard University. And then I bought a whole lot of books, and, looked at the likes of, just trying to think, Mark Pitulek. I'll come to me in a second. There's a few other veterans that have actually looked at natural law, looked at common law, Old English law, Roman law.
Now, we hear all these laws in this last few years. I've heard them all: common law, natural law. But what law is Australia running on now? What is the base law that we're running on?
We're running on two different systems. We're mainly running on statute law, maritime admiralty, which is corporate. It's all corporatised. So it's a corporate Commonwealth government, it's a corporate state government, right down to corporate councils. So it's all corporations, which is well and good. They can run any way they want. However, you as an individual need to know what jurisdiction you're in.
And so what's the second law?
Well, the second one is still the Commonwealth, the organic Commonwealth of Australia. It's still there. Yeah. That's another one. But obviously for the Indigenous people of this land, that's completely different for them. Right? They grew up in a completely different system. They're sovereigns. Yeah. They were born on this land, first in, as a maxim in law, first in time, first in law. Yeah. All right? So they have completely different rights, and I respect that. We don't really own our own property, by the way. We only have right of use. Yeah. All of us, right? So whether that's from our Creator, He's given us the ability to, own something, it's really just the right of use. We're just managers. We're just managing the land. We're managing our own property. We're managing, all the physical, tangible things that are in this world. We're just managing them. We don't really own them outright.
You said about a two-edged sword early on. Do you think the corporate law can be a two-edged sword? Because you were talking about amazing ways of approaching doctors and stuff with contracts that I hadn't heard before, and I thought, wow, that would have been something that could have helped.
Yeah, so there are two realms. So we always, a lot of people act in a public realm, and there is a private realm, and people need to know the difference between private and public, right? So if you're in your private home, for instance, a lot of people practice their own privacy. They have their own privacy. They're in a private realm, but over the last probably 20 years, people have been duped into voluntarily entering the public realm, whether that's through social media, volunteering their information, whether that's through contracts with corporations. And everything is, if you understand contract law of equity, you'll understand exactly where it stands, that we have the ability to say yes or no to particular offers. So
you were saying that everything is an offer.
Of course, everything's an offer.
Explain that to people, because I know it's wrote to you, but to others, the concept is new.
It is, yeah. So everything is an offer, and it has to be. Otherwise, if it's not, you would be considered a slave.
Yeah.
And they cannot announce that you are a slave, right? So, yeah, basically everything is an offer. You can accept or conditionally accept, which is probably a better way of accepting, or you can say no, which is a little bit dishonourable, but best way is to say have a conditional acceptance. So if they're mandating something, you can accept with your conditions and enter a contract under your terms. Yeah. That's what a lot of people don't realise.
And can you explain what you said about that in terms with the vaccine? I know it's too late now because everyone got vaccinated, but not everyone, but so many. But that was really astonishing. You I think you took the...
It was unprecedented, and I did speak to a few lawyers at the time, just trying to find out what they understood. And it was interesting that people that have spent 5 years plus in university studying law and then practicing law did not know where we legally and lawfully where we stood. Yeah. Right. So that's why I started studying contract law at the time. So yeah, everything was mandated. It was actually the states that were mandating, not the federal government. Right. The states. People need to understand that.
That's why Canberra didn't have any mandates.
Well, when we were protesting at the wrong parliament, but that's fine. It was just a show of force, right? Yeah. But yeah, the states were mandating, and then the local councils were trying to enforce, and the police department was enforcing it, which is fine. But people need to understand that, everything was offer and acceptance, right? You still have choice, you still have free will. Under natural law, you have free will, right? But under statute law, you still have you still can accept or conditionally accept an offer, or reject it outright if you wish to do so as well.
So you were saying, like with the doctors of the vaccine, you could have said, I'll take it under these conditions, that if anything happens to me.
So the biggest problem, and I don't know if you want to go in depth, if you're okay to do that. Yeah, okay, well. So the issue was, and I always research, and I'm very fluent when it comes to the internet protocol. So I know how to get to various sites and see, how things are set up. So the pharmaceutical companies had no liability. They had private contracts with the government, which we weren't privy to. The government took no liability either, right? So they passed it on to businesses and end users. With the doctors, they were under pressure. I believe it was from, APRA? There was a body there. Yeah, there was a body there. So they put them under pressure basically to say, look, this is what you should be recommending, or else, right? So that was the thing, that everyone was coerced at the time. Not many people could think freely, and not many people wanted to take the liability. So the liability was pushed onto the doctors, the liability was pushed onto the businesses, and the government washed their hands of it, and so did the pharmaceuticals. Right, so if you're going to be dealing with individuals now that are mandating or pressuring you to do something, then you need to hold them liable. So yeah, you can issue notices of liability and malfeasance to people if they give you bad advice.
Yeah.
If they give you advice that is going to harm you.
Yeah.
And that's important. And I think a lot of people realise that, but they just didn't want to admit it publicly.
So from a practical point of view, you could have gone up to your doctor and said, "I'll take it as long as you sign that if anything happens to me, you'll pay for all my medical bills and stuff like this."
You can go individually, hold people liable, right? But you can also do it at top level. Yeah. And a lot of people did it at top level. They served the right documents to the Australian government. When the Australian government actually put it in writing, that they recommend, I believe the word, and I've got the paperwork there, I believe it was actually stronger than recommend, could have been mandatory. That's when you respond, right? That's when you got to respond on paper with a legal notice, right? So there was a process, and there was a few people that put some great notices together, and you serve those notices, registered post, to the correct individuals in the government to let them know, thank you for the offer, but I will accept it under these terms and conditions, that it is safe, that there's no adverse effects, and so on and so on and so on.
I can read the ingredients.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, it has to be full disclosure in any contract. So if they're offering, something, then they have to have full disclosure.
It's interesting with language, what you're saying, because I don't think anyone's ever said this, but the little gulf between fully coerced and mandated is slavery. You go into mandated, you're slaves. Being as coerced as we are is as close as you can get, and still pretend you're free.
Well, you got it. We actually speak probably 3 different languages in the English-speaking world, right? So we're speaking your typical Oxford Dictionary English. Yeah. We speak slang, and part of my words, sometimes I mix them up, even after so many years in Australia. I know about 5 languages, so this is not my native language. And then there's legalese. And most people would not know what legalese is. This language of the courts, of the legal system, right? So the word mandate, as many people are finding out, it doesn't mean that it's binding. It's only binding if you agree to it, right? And that's when it becomes law. Right, that's when it becomes contractual. But prior to that, no. Right. So that's the thing. Like, a lot of people thought mandate, I must do it. It's a must. No, it's not. Yeah, it's not.
And so, the other interesting thing was last night before we went to the meeting at my place where we met you, we were at a pub and there was just lots of people around blissfully happy. And then we come to the meeting and there's a lot of, not tension in the meeting, but there's a lot of angst. Because people are trying to not be disillusioned.
People are very passionate, aren't they? And I get like that sometimes. We're only human. Yeah. So I get something, if I can't get my point across, and people will, and after a while you will notice that people will tend to go down a rabbit hole and get anxiety and think that the world is sometimes it's worse than it is, right? But they're in control. Yeah. You're still in control. So, look, there's a lot of passionate people. There's a lot of people that are doing amazing work, right? And we saw that with a lot of the farmers that were present, a lot of the one of the experts on natural law, and he's an author. Amazing work. I've spent a lot of time with him trying to understand natural law. There's a lot of passionate people there that are doing excellent work.
Well, but to tell you another thing, just to get back to what I was saying. So when I was sitting in the pub and then I'm sitting in the meeting, and in history I read that less than 10% of the French were in the resistance against the Nazis. So if this had been Paris then, there would have been people everywhere, Nazis around, and myself, and if you were there, we would have been sitting there quiet going, why are they so happy?
Yeah.
Why are they so happy? Why aren't they rallying up against the Nazis?
Ignorance is bliss, isn't it?
Yeah. And if we look back now, you probably wouldn't find one French person who wouldn't want to be in the resistance or claim to lean with the resistance. Yet at the time, 90% went. Yeah. Do you think that's what we're seeing now, that there's something in people, even in your communist upbringing, of people just want to go with the flow and they just feel powerless despite all the power they have? they switch it off and go, no, I'm powerless. I've just got to go where the...
Become disillusioned with it. And by the way, I'm not, I was born in a communist country, never really fitted in, so I didn't get brainwashed by that whole communist agenda. And that was good because I was, I saw it, but I wasn't really drawn or consumed by it.
So, could you tell the difference when you finally got to Australia between?
Of course. Yeah. So I was very lucky that I had my grandmother speak many languages. I think it was about 10 different languages. German was one of those, and she used to listen to the German radio, so which we could pick up from Austria.
This is Free Germany.
It was actually, I think, from Vienna, but and she could understand it, so she knew what was happening in the West, right? So even though it was a complete media blockout in Czechoslovakia at the time, she understood what was going on, and she would translate a lot of that information. So I knew from a very early age what was happening in the West and what was happening within the communist country. So sorry, just going back to your question. Look, people, it's ignorance is bliss, and that's fine for them. Each to their own. You cannot go shaking people, and if they're not ready to wake up, you can't shake them, and they need to see for themselves. And what's the best way to do it? I mean, and I've tried the old-fashioned way, shake the people. Lost family members because of that and all that. But and I'm coming back together with those people because you got to understand that they have different programming, right? Everyone thinks they have the truth, right? And they're in the right. They're in a way they're right. Everyone has got the truth, but the truth that they've been fed is what they believe is the truth. They believe they're doing the right thing. So you can't really be mad with these people because they believe what they're doing or what the government is telling them that they should do is the right thing, and often, and sometimes it is, and often it's not, right? And that's the thing, like sometimes it's to your benefit, but but it's those few occasions when it's not that you need to be able to be have common sense first of all, right? Be able to do your own research. Don't get persuaded by either left or the right. Just get all the information and be able to. And that's I believe the people that will now prosper in this age, in the information age, are the people that can filter information, that can consume information fast, and that can use it to their advantage. So your brain doesn't have a firewall, right? So you need to be able to filter a lot of that false information out. All that fake news, all that sort of information. You need to be able to filter it out yourself. And a lot of people can't do that. They're too lazy or they just haven't been taught the right way. So they'll consume anything and everything thinking that it's in their best interest.
Well, look at another word. One of the biggest words we've had now is fear. Fear has corrupted people.
Yes.
But entrepreneurs, I'm not saying they don't have fear, but they must control fear in order to do what they do. Otherwise, you wouldn't achieve anything. How do you control fear?
Yeah, that's a good one. And I'm still learning. We're not perfect. But so if you have a look at entrepreneurs, the biggest fear is failure, being shamed, being labelled a failure in school, right? You look at the school system, that's what they're inbreeding, right? They're breeding basically that, if you get it wrong, you'll be shamed, you'll get the wrong mark. So we're not taught to pick ourselves up, and when we fail, and that's just really just learning. It's part of the learning process.
It's essential for entrepreneurs because you capitalise on what you...
Fail many times, yeah. You look at Elon Musk and a few other, people that have gone through so many different failures before they find something that they're good at, that, it's a good business model, that other people adopt and will pay for. But, yeah, so as an entrepreneur, my biggest fear, honestly, and I can go through a few of those if you like. Yeah. So being in the corporate world, 20-something years, the biggest fear is, okay, I'm going to lose my benefits. There was healthcare, travel, all sorts of perks, good pay, you name it. So that's the biggest fear. People, getting over the fact that if you lose your job, that you won't survive. Second one was, I need to now know how to manage my money. I need to know how to invest that money smart. right? And I've had some failures there as well, right? So when I took control of we purchased a commercial property, and that was going to be our source of income. But yeah, it's a learning curve, and I had a bad tenant. That happens, right? So I had to learn law, and he wasn't paying the outgoings and the rent for a long time, So I had to learn how to serve him properly, and do it respectfully, do it honestly, give him an option to pay it back, but he just wasn't having any of it, So, lawyers got involved on his side. I represented myself, won. But the point is that you will fail, As an entrepreneur, you will fail many times. And the fee, I think entrepreneurs harness that fee, when they get down and they lose all their money, for instance, they come back with a vengeance. It's like, next time I'm going to do it better.
Well, that's why I think about the freedom movement. It's like an entrepreneurial movement because there's no government telling them what to do. This is people just capitalising on ideas.
Grassroots, isn't it? It's grassroots. Yeah, there's a lot of people now that, look, people just want to be left alone. Yeah. There's two people, right? Two types of people. There's people that want to be left alone, and then those people that just won't leave us alone, isn't it? So, entrepreneurs, freedom fighters, truth seekers, people that want to be autonomous, want to be self-sufficient, you name them, your hippies. There's different groups of people, but same mindset. We just want to prosper. We want to collaborate. We want to serve humanity. We want to serve other people as well, whether that's with goods or services or whatever it is, education, you name it. We want to thrive. I think that's a word that hasn't been used in a long time. We want to prosper and thrive. We don't want to be taxed to the eyeballs. We don't want to be controlled, right? We want to have the freedom, But then with that freedom comes responsibility as well. Yeah. Right? It's a huge responsibility. So, you can't just take the freedom and then, rely on the government to bail you out. All right? If you're going to take control of your own estate, your own property, your own finances, if things are not going well, you need to look after that as well.
Well, as a man who's been on the both, where you'd be working in the corporate world and then you took on entrepreneur.
So I was entrepreneur within the company and then entrepreneur or more of a property investor.
Okay, so before you took that, when you took on that responsibility, I know there must have been the fear, oh my God, all the responsibilities are mine now, but how did you personally benefit from taking on the responsibility? Was there any benefit?
Yeah, and the hardest thing is convincing your partner, isn't it? Yeah. Convincing your family to move, a few hundred kilometres away and have a completely different life. Yeah, look.
But I mean, personally benefit as a human.
Personal, that's right. So that's a challenge, but personal benefit was my health first of all. The corporate world, I was flying 3 months of the year around the world, which sounds great, but then your family life is disjointed. So my health was suffering. I wasn't eating right, even though I knew what was good and bad for me. The diet was all over the place. Your everyday routine is out of place. I was connected 24/7. I was in charge of quite a large operational team across Asia Pacific. So the problem was I would never get any sleep. And to this very day, I've got very disjointed sleep. All right. I'm benefiting from it now. But yeah, over the last 5 years, my health has just improved tremendously. I've taken on even martial arts, believe it or not. Oh, wow. Like my three boys, my three teenage boys, started doing it, and I thought, you know what, I'm not really participating. So my wife and myself, so 5 of us started doing martial arts. I stuck with it, so I have my boys. So yeah, we've got 3 black belts in the family, which is great. But that's a personal investment, obviously. Yeah. And yeah, the health is just much better environment. I mean, look where we are. To be able to be on, and this is a friend's property, but I've got one just like it. To be in nature, I get recharged in nature. Yeah, that's why I love nature. I grew up in the mountains, so I absolutely love it. I conserve nature as well. So we've got a conservation agreement on our property, and I want to keep that for future generations. So yeah, just being able to be outside. I spend a lot of time outside, a lot of time helping farmers. Being on a tractor. So I've got to,
All new skills you're learning.
It's all new skills. Yeah, it's all new skills. But
This is invigorating.
it is, and obviously it's a more relaxed lifestyle. So you got to give up on the money. I think that's when the money's really good. A lot of people get sucked into the trap that's all there is.
Yeah.
And I guess we got to, it's money is the root of all evil. Well, it's actually not money itself. It's the greed, right? Right? The people seeking more and more and more. It's never enough. So you got to know your limits, and you got to balance your life out. You got to have the work-life balance. A lot of corporations will use it as a slogan, work-life balance. But if you're in information technology, it's very hard to do that.
Going back to where you said you're growing up, my sense of it in a communist country, just from talking to people who grew up in it, is you have to hide who you really are and what you really think, because you can't really challenge the government openly as you can. So you literally live like an Anne Frank within yourself, apart from maybe some close friends. And now I see that's where we're heading now in this country. So, and what I think is, when you said we can't wake people up, I feel we need a marketing campaign for what are the benefits of being with the freedom movement. And one benefit, I think, is we give you the ability to be yourself, say what you think and stuff like this. And I saw this last night in the meeting. I mean, people were, not arguing, but there was some disagreements. But I thought, but that's free speech. That's the beauty of free speech.
No, that's right. So just a bit of history there. Communist Czechoslovakia split into two republics and democratic, right? So that was overturned. People had enough of that sort of control. But I remember as a 9-10-year-old at the time what it was like, and it can get to that extent. And there's examples around the world. You look at China, North Korea, and many other places, where you're under very strict control. That is very limited what you can do, right? So
also not just do, but be.
And be yourself. That's number one thing that I preach to others, is know who you are. Because a lot of us do not know who we are.
But to find out who we are, I believe you need certain freedoms. You need freedom of choice.
Yes.
And you need freedom of speech, so you can articulate your journey.
That's right.
and choose your own path through freedom of choice. So if the government suddenly comes along and goes, no, we'll take over that, then you're never going to discover who you are.
Yeah, so knowing who you are, I guess you need to know your ancestry. That's important, your roots, right? And that's very important for, obviously, the Aboriginal people or original people of this land. That's very important because they're losing their identity. But every one of us has got those roots, and you need to know what you're good at, who you are, what you stand for, legally what you stand for, lawfully what you stand for. And I guess at the moment, you came up with that term last night. It's not waking people up, but we want to be standing up, isn't it? Standing up, yeah. Standing up for your rights. Yeah,
standing up. Because you liberate yourself once you stand up. You basically take responsibility for your own journey and yourself.
That's correct, yeah. But legally, under the statute law, you want to know where you stand as well. Are you in their jurisdiction, or are you your own man? Yeah. Right? Because a lot of the legislation, most of the legislation applies to persons, legal persons, not man. So that's something that people need to understand. But they still have freedom, it's just they're not practicing it. Yeah. Legally and lawfully. Yeah.
So knowledge is liberating.
Knowledge is very liberating. And I took legal action during COVID. Some places I did it respectfully, right, where I explained things to them and they opened up to everyone.
It's interesting to have short courses of what you've learned, and with others to go, this is a short course, so people could, because they're weapons. Knowledge is a weapon.
It is, yeah. So there's many places you can actually go to find this information. Did you want some Maybe we can put some links down.
Yeah, we'll put some links in.
Yeah, I think that'd be easier rather than me rattling them off. But yeah, there is a lot of good information. I've learned from other mentors, obviously, not just what's out there in the public realm, but people privately as well. The important thing is a lot of people were scared to stand up for their rights, and that's important. I mean, when the local club was discriminating after they dropped the emergency health orders, right? There was no legislation to support their discrimination anymore. So I held them accountable legally, right? So yeah, I had to go into an argument with the top lawyers in Sydney that was defending a company that's probably worth $500 million. I won't name them, but again, and I gave them a week. I actually went a little bit longer than that. They did not respond with why legally they can justify that. So I went to the Human Rights Commission. They got reported, and a few days later, magically, everyone was allowed to enter the premises. And that's a big organisation. They have clubs in Sydney and elsewhere. But that's the thing, that a lot of people did not know what their rights were. Yeah. Right?
Well, that's how we've grown. We've grown up. Like I've grown up. I came here when I was 5. I've grown up in a country where you didn't have to.
No.
It was pretty free. It was pretty easygoing. Culture sort of celebrated the freedom of the Aussie spirit. It was the larrikin was our thing, but that's all gone now.
Well, look, it's still there. It's still in our DNA.
Or on the facade of it is gone.
Yeah. Look, there's a lot of people that have retreated to the hills. That have gone. They just sort of shut down and they said, I don't want any part of this. Right. So you'll be surprised how many people you will find that still have that culture, right? That still practice the old ways of doing things, that are still true. They stand in honour. Not many people will stand in honour. Not many people will honour their contracts. My word is my bond, and not many people will do that, right? And then what do you do when they break that bond? Well, you got to hold them accountable. Right, that's what you got to do under contract law. Yeah.
Well, moving forward and talking about solutions, what are your thoughts on solutions moving forward?
Yeah, so depends where you are. Obviously, different solutions. Different people offer different solutions. Right. So where we are here, and I spent some time, 20-something years in Sydney. Right. There are people there offering solutions. So it all depends on where you are. Where we are here, obviously we've got to. Right from the ocean through to the mountains, very short distance, so there's diversity here in the environment. So I've connected with a lot of communities. Community is the answer, I think, to a lot of this, right? Whether it's like-minded people, whether it's people that can be self-sufficient, that can, produce...
Strength in numbers.
There's strength in numbers, but it's people helping people, isn't it? Helping your neighbour, helping people in your community. So some of the solutions that we've put in place, this was during even pre-COVID. We had a lot of bushfires, like I said. So we had a problem with communication. Quite a hilly valley, and a lot of the Telstra services didn't work. So during major fires, 2017 I think it was, and 2019 I believe, we've put communication in place. So we took control of the communication there. So, the property that we have, we actually put a radio tower up. Oh, wow. We work closely with the Amateur Radio Club of Paul Macquarie. They were doing some testing. They put a repeater up there just so they could relay the messages over UHF radio. And then we also, got little radios ourselves. So here's one. Right, so we can program those on different frequencies and... very similar to the UHF radio you have in a 4-wheel drive. Yeah. That's one way we can communicate. Right? I think that was very important because even the fire services, fire departments, and so on, they lost communication. A lot of it was controlled from Sydney. They had the authority to make decisions, even though the local fire departments knew the landscape much better. They couldn't make decisions. So a lot of farmers were putting out fires themselves. It was amazing. It was an amazing time. So that's one thing we did. Communication, obviously food security. That's quite a big one. Water security. So water security, a lot of people, have realised during the drought. We had a drought too. That's another one I haven't mentioned. So during, a lot of people had, some people had bores, and they were helping their neighbours, to fill up their tanks. A lot of people wouldn't even, like deep in the mountains, they wouldn't even shower during the fires because, they were using the water purely, reserving it for when the fire came through. We were distributing water, using, I've got my vehicle here, a ute, just any way we could. Because the river dried up.
Everything you're talking about is community.
It's all community-based. Information. Education is another big one.
Community is, like, they're trying to make us global, which, and community might be the only way really to fight back against that.
Well, I don't know if you need to fight back. You just show a better way, isn't it? People will gravitate to you once you show them, when you lead by example.
Yeah.
When you lead by example, people will gravitate to you because they're curious, They won't listen to you if you tell them.
Yeah.
But if you show them, all right, or if they see you prosper, they go, well, I want to prosper too.
Right? Well, what was interesting was I was saying early on that whoever's doing all these changes in the world, they've got a plan.
Yes.
A destination, a vision.
Yeah.
And the ends justifies the means. They're going there. So they probably don't even think of themselves evil. They've got a plan. This is what they're doing. This is the darkness we have to go through to reach their light. And I was saying that we need to get our own plan and visually see it, because once we can see it, we can reach it. But now I'm thinking, and I was thinking this yesterday, I was writing about it, that we're maybe seeing it not with our eyes, but with our actions. Even last night, we're creating the Australia we want through these trial and error things.
Actions, yeah. So I've spent a lot of time studying natural law and manifestation and, the whole lot. It's all new to me, but I've learnt a lot. So, okay, we have thoughts. We need to voice that. We need to voice that or write them down. We need to share that with others so that we have a collective vision and then action, right? Nothing happens without action.
And the ideas, I think, we'll jump on the ideas that work. Exactly. And this is what I'm seeing is happening in the community now.
Yeah, exactly. But it's all through action, right? You can talk about it, you can shake people, you can say you're doing the wrong thing, but unless you're doing the right thing and succeeding, and so is your neighbour and your community. And it's very hard, I know, that when I say neighbour, some of your neighbours could be disconnected. They're completely on a different wavelength. But they'll come around, they'll come around because they'll see you prosper.
So they want a part of the cake too.
Well, that's right. I mean, we all want to thrive, don't we? Right? No matter what system you're under, right? Whatever ism we're under, you still want to thrive. You want to prosper. You want your children to be healthy, to prosper. We all want to prosper, And there's enough money, there's enough resources in the world, there's enough land in the world for everyone to prosper, right? We don't need to be restricting anything, right? And if I'm doing well, it doesn't mean that you're going to do badly because I'm doing well. I'm taking all the wealth. There's enough to go around. There's no problem with that.
And the prosper can mean not just wealth, but the prosper can mean being yourself, which is, I think, the discovery of being who you are and allowing the world to benefit from you finding out the best version of yourself is another way to prosper.
Yeah, and that sounds sort of very cliche, doesn't it? Very new age sort of thinking. But again, there's two sides to that, right? Knowing who you are as an individual will just benefit you, right? And the people around you. Legally, right? Legally knowing who you are, what jurisdiction you're in, you won't get other authorities intervening in your private life. And that's very important because that's exactly what we saw over the last few years.
And that gives you power.
That gives you immense power.
Yeah.
That gives you
getting our countrymen to feel that they are empowered human beings would be a great country to aim for.
Yeah, correct. And you want to be acting in the private. You don't want to contract with these corporations, right? You can contract on your terms. Nothing wrong with that. I mean, we contract every day. But if you're getting challenged by someone and they're telling you what to do, well, thank you for the offer. I will accept it under these conditions. Or, no, thank you, I do not wish to contract. I do not consent to that. It's as simple as that sometimes. But people do not know what their rights are, what their legal rights are too. Once we have that basic knowledge, and it's really basic knowledge, it goes a long way. And you do it with respect, right? People are just trying to do their job, right? They're acting in an office, right? And your police officers is an example. There's good and bad police officers. The ones that are bad are just not educated properly, right? They just haven't been taught, how they should be working with the community. And in the country areas, there's more country cops there that actually want to work with the community, right?
Makes their life easy.
Of course. You want to work with the community. You want to make sure the community is doing well, right? It makes your job easier as a police officer, right? But if you're going to be mandating, enforcing, right, on individuals, just make sure that you're doing it the right way. You're doing it respectfully.
One last question is, we grew up in the USSR and it looked like it would never fall.
Are you from Russia?
No, but it looked like it would. From where we were standing, It looked like it would never fall. Yeah. In fact, I lived with some Romanians for a while before Romania fell, and they said it will never fall. Yeah. And then it did. Yeah. And so it shows that anything's possible. But from what you're saying, it's people just basically saying we don't want this. That eventually
you'll get a critical mass after a while, right? You've got your grassroots people that can see what's happening. The people that, like myself, who have lived through this in their childhood, they can see it straight away. A lot of the Europeans can see this straight away. Yeah. They've seen so many different conflicts, wars, communism, you name it. They've seen it all, right? So they were first to be alerted. They went, what's going on here? I've seen this before. Something's not right. But all of these regimes that are suppressing people, you watch China. China's going to be very interesting over the next couple of years. I actually think it's going to be even sooner than that. People have had enough. The lockdowns that happened in China were just unbelievable, right? And when you push people that far, when they've got nothing to lose, they'll lose it.
Yeah. That's a great way to end it.